Welcome everyone to another Singerreise video podcast. My name is Jonathan Sylvia and I'm your host. Thanks for joining us. This is the second video in a series about memorization. In the first video, we talked about what it means to be on book and what it means to be off book. We also talked about the different scenarios that come up for singers and whether the general expectation is to be memorized or unmemorized for each of those scenarios. In this video, we'll talk about my own personal habits for memorization and some of the techniques that I use, for example, as I'm learning all of these Singerreise songs. There's also going to be a third video, however, where we discuss other techniques that other singers and some of you might use for memorization. So be sure to tune in and watch the third one as well. This video, on the other hand, might be a little on the underwhelming side. As it turns out, I tend to learn music really fast. Because of this, my habits for memorization are pretty simple. They aren't as complex, perhaps, as other singers go to. Now, on the way of confession, however, sometimes I learn music just a little too fast, and I don't actually dig in and learn it as thoroughly as I would like. In fact, my habit for procrastination and getting distracted with all of the other things that need to be done, well, that habit of procrastination is very well developed, and so sometimes I don't allow enough time for the memorization process. It almost always turns out just fine. I wouldn't be where I am today if I routinely was showing up to events without being memorized. But because this is about the actual life of an actual working opera singer, I'm admitting that this is one area of my professional life where I could probably improve. That being said, I do have a few things that I tend to do when I do them as I intend to. One of the first things that I do with a new score is to sing through everything, front to back. This does a couple of things for me. First, I need to know whether or not I can physically, possibly sing it. I'm a bass-baritone, for example, and so I'm looking for things that might be too high and outside of my range. I'm also looking for areas that are too high for too long, where it has a higher tessitura, we would say. In those cases, I need to turn down the contract and just simply not proceed any further. But, of course, if it's just simply a challenge, I need to make a mental note of it and then spend some time on working it into my body and into my technique. As far as memorization goes, the other thing that first run through is good for is making mental notes of where the tricky spots are going to wind up being. For example, there may be fast passages or particularly wordy passages or places where there are multiple verses for one simple tune. There can also be recitatives. Any of these are going to be more difficult, and I have to mentally make sure that I am allowing enough time to work on those passages as opposed to the prettier, slow passages which are going to be really easy to learn. After that initial run-through, it's time to start preparing the score. One of the things that I do early on is I go through and I tab everything. For example, this is the score for Don Giovanni, which I'm preparing for the role of Leporello, a role that I've already done. I've gone through and I've tabbed everything. So here is, for example, is a recitative, another recitative. Here is the famous catalog aria. So I've put on the word aria there. A little hard to see. Every entrance for Leporello is marked in this score with tabs. Every number that he sings in is also marked. The finales sometimes are very long, so I'll have multiple tabs for the multiple parts of the finale. If you write on the tabs like I have done with ink, just be careful not to smudge the ink. The mental note for memorization that is happening here is I'm taking stock of what happens in which acts. For example, if there's a really skimpy Act 1, but a really heavy Act 2, then I know that I'm going to have to spend a majority of time on Act 2. I can't spend half of my time on Act 1 and expect to spend half my time on Act 2 because I'll run out. Another aspect of preparing the score, of course, is to write in the translation. So if you want to find out more about writing in a translation, I have a series of videos that's dedicated just for doing that. They're episodes 6, 7, and 8. And I think those were some of the mustache episodes. But while I have the score here, I'll show you a little bit of what I've done there. Here we go, at the beginning of the opera, Don Giovanni. My character, Leporello, is on stage doing a bit of singing, and I've gone and written in the translation. See that? I also highlight all of the stuff that Leporello sees, or sings. Of course, if you're using somebody else's score, you can't use ink, you can't use highlighters, so write in pencil. But if it's your own score, and particularly for operas, yeah, go ahead and highlight your line, just like I was doing there. Of course, this isn't a video about score preparation, it's about memorization. So what I find is that when I do the writing in of the translation, something about the physical act of slowly and carefully writing in all of those words helps me learn even the original text a little bit better. It really cuts down on the amount of time that I have to spend on drilling a little bit later. Of course, that brings us to the main part of the memorization. Drilling. Repeating. Over and over and over and over again. I don't have any magic tricks. I don't have any chemically induced trances that I put myself in. There's no meditation involved. There's no sleeping with a book under your pillow. None of that. It's just good old-fashioned hard work. And for me, that's pretty much all that there is to it. I could end the video now and leave you completely underwhelmed. But let me tell you a little bit more about this drilling process. As I'm working through the piece, I tend to be looking for patterns. Patterns in the notes and patterns, of course, in the text itself. These patterns kind of act like mental signposts for me, and I can then start moving from signpost to signpost to signpost. For example, in number 10, Rast, there was this one line, Die Füßen frugen nicht nach Rast. There were some consonant clusters for me to grab onto. Füßen frugen, both start with F. That's easy. Then there are the three N's. Frugen ends with an N. Then we have nicht Nacht. Frugen nicht Nacht. You can put all of that together. So that's a little signpost for me, and that makes the line a lot easier to remember. Sometimes text is repeated, so you can look for the repetitions. You can also look for the places where there are rhymes in the text. So you know that this word with that ending is in this line, and this word with a very similar ending is in this line. Sometimes there are multiple verses of text for the same tune over and over. What really seems to help there is figuring out where the two verses are different. So you can distinctly remember the first verse is the one that does this, but the second verse is the one that does this. Knowing the translation, of course, is also vitally important for memorization. If you know what you're saying as you are singing it, you can then keep track of what comes next in the story. For example, if one line is about the gecko walking across some rocks, you know that the next line in the story is the saber-toothed tiger going and eating the gecko. Now, I have no idea what song that might be. That might just be a TV commercial of some sort. For the actual drilling part, for the repetition, I try to keep it small, adding just a little bit at a time. For example, I'll start with just the first one or two words of the first line, and I'll repeat that a few times. Then I'll add on one or two more words, and I'll repeat all of those together. I'll repeat it again. I'll add on a couple more words, and then a couple more words. And then soon I'll be trying to do the entire line. I'll keep doing the entire line until I can get it reliably well all in one go. Then I start work on the second line, word by word by word. Then I put it with the first line, try and do the two lines again until I can get it reliably well. Then I'll add on a third line and a fourth line, and eventually make my way all the way through the page. I also don't try to memorize the entire song all in one sitting. I usually do about 15 to 25, maybe 30 minutes of hard, focused, attentive memorization work. But after that point, I need to get my brain off of that and have my brain working on something else. Then, of course, the trick is to make sure to come back to it and put in another good chunk of focused work. Now, don't be discouraged if you need to go back and review some of the stuff that you had already worked on. Some of the stuff you thought was down solid is probably not so solid when you come back to it. That's okay. Spend a little bit more time on it, go through the process again, and maybe the next time that you come back to it, a lot more of it will stick. Another consideration is speed. If it happens to be a fast piece, then I need to slow down the tempo until the point where I can physically wrap my mouth around all of the words. I then keep it at this tempo while I'm doing the memorization and while I'm doing all of the repetitions. This gives my brain just a little bit of extra time to think about what word is coming next in the line and what line is coming next. Once I can do it reliably at that slow speed, then I'll bump it up a notch. And if I can do it reliably at that speed, then I'll bump it up another one until I'm at the tempo that I want. One big thing to note here is that while I'm doing the drilling and the repetition, I'm not singing full out every single time. In most cases, I'm doing what's called marking. It's a term that singers use to describe very low, soft, dynamic singing, and often singing that's done an octave below what's actually written. Doing this lets my mind be the thing that is doing the work and the exercising, and letting the voice take a little bit of a rest. I will probably need to use the voice for something else more intensive later that day. Also, I don't necessarily need to be sitting at the piano plunking out my notes as I'm doing the memorization. The memorization work can be done just about anywhere, so long as I have an environment where I can remain focused. Sometimes if there's too much noise, or especially if there's other music going on, memorization doesn't go as well. But if it's quiet, I can do it just about anywhere. One of my favorite ways to do this is to load up a piano app on my tablet or on my phone. And sometimes I'll even have my music score right next to it. So as I need to, I'll get a pitch from the piano, but usually just one or two pitches every now and then is all that I need to do the memorization. Most of the drilling and repetition is just to get the words memorized. There is, of course, a later stage of memorization where you have to start memorizing in all of the dynamics and start working into the body and memorizing with the body what it needs to do in terms of using the breath to support particular phrases. At that stage, it's often good to have somebody playing piano with you to help run the piece from front to back, and that will really tell you where some of your memorization is a little bit lacking and what parts you might have missed. And really, that's all that I do for memorization. Again though, we're going to be taking a look in the next video about what some other singers do for memorization. And of course, I'd also love to include some of your comments. So if you have thoughts or techniques about memorization, add them to the comments on this video or on my blog or in Facebook. You can also send me an email if you don't want it to be public. So anyway, give me some feedback and I hope to bring all of this information to you in the next video. If you want to find out more about the life of a working opera singer, check out our website, Singerreise.com, and there you'll find some resources as well as several articles about the life of singing. You'll also find some things about Winterreise. You can also check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/Singerreise, or our YouTube channel where you're presently watching this video. You can also choose to become a patron of Singerreise by signing up with patreon.com/Singerreise. We are always looking for people to offer just $1 or a couple dollars or even as much as $7 or more every single month to help produce these videos. They are very expensive in terms of resources and time for me to put together, so I appreciate any that you can do. Of course, if you can't become a financial supporter of Singerreise, do consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice. Tell people about Singerreise, and hopefully more people will hear it and get the information. Anyway, thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next one.